who are here, and you will permit me to stand on existing protocols, as we say here. I'll go straight into the topic. A lot has already been touched on the issue of punishment, and I'd like to spend more time on the question of marriage-related issues and rape. But I'll say very briefly, there's a consensus among all Muslim scholars, and I think anybody who has a head on top of their body, that it is a major wrong, it is an atrocious crime, it should be dealt with severely. Muslim scholars such as Qadi ibn al-Arabi even says, for a woman to have her dignity trampled on through an act such as rape, she would even prefer that she was robbed of her property. In other words, whatever punishment you're going to give, you will have to give rape a more severe punishment than armed robbery. I think enough has been said that the perpetrator is the person who is being punished. We don't blame people who are driving at night for being armed robbed. We don't blame the victim of theft, that why was your door not strong enough? You should have put better burglar proofing, that your pocket wasn't deep enough. That's why the pickpocket took it. I think the need to really focus on the perpetrator and deal with that. I think some terms I've heard, like spiritual rape on some of the things, rape by jinn, etc. I think there are some terms that were used by scholars of the past, some present, to describe psychiatric problems and pseudo-pregnancy. But when we, check the DNA of the person, you can know there was a human perpetrator there. When it comes to punishment, I think punishments are very important. They need to be severe, but with 95% of cases not being reported, rape is the most underreported violent crime. Only about 5% are reported, and of the 5% in Nigeria, less than 4% get attended to. This is not to talk of very unsuccessful prosecutions, because the defense usually then says, no, it was consensual, and then it has really undermined the case. Hello?
We can hear you, Sheikh. Continue.
All right.
Well, it's view.
All right. So the problem, I think, we need to look at how to make rape very costly for the perpetrator. That the thought of rape is made so unattractive that the risk is not worth the taking to the deranged person. And I say deranged not in the medical sense. A perpetrator is not a mad person. He had a choice, he's sensible, he is evil and should be dealt with accordingly. When we look at the way Muslim scholars classify rape, just like terrorism, just like brigandage or highway robbery, assassinations, etc., the Quran and Sunnah, while it recognizes rape as an immoral act, it has not prescribed a specific punishment for it. So what Muslim scholars have done has been to do what is called qiyas or ijtihad, juristic reasoning by analogy. So some say the punishment of rape should be similar to zina, which is extramarital sexual relations. So if the perpetrator is married, he would have death sentence. If he is unmarried, he would have 100 lashes. Some of the Maliki scholars add more to that because they treat it a bit, not completely like zina, but zina plus a ta'zir. In other words, there's a discretion on the side of the judge to add more punishment, like imprisonment and a fine to the perpetrator. So Muslim scholars have differed. The other scholars, like Ibn Hazm, look at it as closer to hiraba, what Imam Sharafuddin mentioned, a violent crime, a crime similar to armed robbery, breaking an entry, terrorism, forced seizure, and that, according to Quran chapter 5, verse 33, has a much more severe punishment. It actually has the group of severest punishments, where the judge can choose death sentence, crucifixion, amputation of opposite limbs, or exile or imprisonment. Now, because imprisonment is already the Nigerian common law punishment, I think it's not an area we have a problem with the law. However, remember that the problem of rape, there's more to do, more creativity needed on the side of prevention than on the side of what to do with the perpetrator. The problem, I think, with insisting among Muslim scholars that it is similar to zina is that when you look at the subject area from what is called the maqasid of Sharia, the higher intents and objectives of Islamic jurisprudence, all the laws around zina are actually meant to protect the dignity of the perpetrator. And Islamic law goes out of its way not to punish zina. So it insists on you must have 4 witnesses who see the act graphically, they must be reliable, they must be independent. And the judge, and we see this at the time of the Prophet and his companions, they actually tried not to prosecute offenses of zina, adultery and fornication. So Islam was not actually keen on that. And if there was any good excuse, the punishment would be lifted. Whereas in the case of rape, there's a clear victim, there's a clear perpetrator, and this is an area I think Muslim scholars need to look. It's not a big problem for us here in Nigeria because of the leeway that the judge has. And so in ta'zir cases, just like Hiraba, you can use forensic evidence. Anything that convinces the judge would work. On the topic of marital rape, the big problem I seem to understand from this topic is one of terminologies and definitions. We have an allergy, we have a reaction the moment you say marital rape. It's as if it's an oxymoron. However, if we look at the definition, so while somebody will say, oh no, we don't recognize marital rape, you ask the same person, do you recognize marital sexual assault? He would say yes. Do you recognize marital sexual violence? He would say yes. And so what we are dealing with a lot is to do with terminology. However, one of the maxims of Islamic jurisprudence is that they say al-ibra fil uqud, that what matters when it comes to transactions and agreements, lil maqasid wal ma'ani la lil alfaz wal mabani. The concern of Islamic jurisprudence is not on the words you use to describe things, but what's the intent, what's the meaning. And so when we look at using the word rape to describe what goes on in the family in the form of sexual assault, I think if we look at murder within the family, we don't change the name because it is done in the family. We don't change the name of theft or stealing just because the son stole. We don't say it's not stealing because it's your father and you have some right indirectly to property or injury, etc. So I think one of the challenges again in this area is the assumption that because you call it rape, it automatically takes one punishment for everybody and denies the judge the right to decide what is the most appropriate punishment for every form of rape, some being much more severe than the other, which would be life imprisonment, which would be some other punishment, which would be death sentence, etc. I think it is clear among Muslim scholars that Islam and the Prophet ﷺ taught la darar wa la dirar. You don't harm, nor do you reciprocate harm. So many verses of the Quran and Hadith make scholars conclude that al-asl fil madar at-tahrim, that the premise, the operating default position on Islam on any form of hurt, any form of harm is haram. And that in marriage, anything that humiliates the wife, anything that tramples upon her rights and dignity, you commit any form of domestic abuse or violence, you even insult her parents, it's a basis for which she can get a divorce and actually take you to court for defamation or abuse. So, and that is worse than, you are not even allowed to dispose of her property. How much more trample on her dignity? One problem I see within the general population, and I've attended interfaith programs on the subject of metaphor, is on marital rape, is the kind of metaphors we have for marriage. Unfortunately, some men and cultures view marriage as if it's a sale purchase agreement, as if you are, because you paid something that they call a bride price, that it is equivalent to ownership, or you have bought sexual rights that you can exploit at will. What I see in the Quran and the Sunnah is really more a metaphor for partnership, that the mahar is a gift. It's a token of appreciation. That is why it could be things other than finance. That's why it could be an iron ring. It is not the value of the woman, nor is it a purchase of sexual rights. Both husband and wife have equal sexual rights to each other. What we find in the Quran and the Sunnah is that the Quran describes men and women as azwaj, which means pairs, partners, couples. It describes antum libasul lahunna wa hunna libasul lakum wa antum libasul lahunna, that they are garments, like clothing to cover your dignity. They are garments for you, just as you are garments for them. Allah describes the best of you are those who are best to their wives. It describes men and women as awliya, protecting friends of one another. And so when we look at the issue, even in marriage, of sexual rights, because it is a right of the wife to have sexual access to her husband under justified circumstances, and it is a right of the husband to have sexual access to his wife under fair circumstances, it is a sin on the husband or the wife to unjustifiably deny the other what is their due right that emanates from the marital contract. And so I would say here that a right to use a relationship for pleasure is a mutual right, not a right to abuse. The permission for sex is not a permission to humiliate or to coerce and oppress. The right to touch the other and benefit is not a right to beat. The right to make love, strengthen the relationship, have children is not a right to sexual violence, sexual abuse, or rape, even in the name of marriage. And so one of the big challenges, I would say, on the question of marital rape we have in our society is forced marriage, where cultural pressure, family pressure, force a woman to marry. And I should say some men are forced to marry women they really don't want from family pressure. However, what we have seen from doctors reporting the problems of marital rape is a woman who was forced to marry somebody, and then the man wants to dominate and teach his wife a lesson, and he rapes her, sexually assaults her, and she can't go to court and say, my husband sexually assaulted me. Of course, from marital counselors, we've also seen a lot of problems coming in this area from pornography and the influence it is having. Alcohol is a big area on this. And the last thing I'd like to touch on is a comment on the question that was raised earlier on the age of marriage or betrothal. Most cultures, most customs throughout history until modern age never fixed a prescribed age for marriage. It has been left open to family. It is the family that would decide what age you would own a weapon, climb a horse, ride an animal, buy, own, manage your inheritance, hold political office, etc. It was not the society that dictated many of these things. It was the family that would say, yes, you can ride, you can this. What we find in Islamic history is mainly what is called descriptive. If somebody says the Prophet Muhammad married Aisha at an early age, and some say 6, and I should mention here, Muslim scholars have differed on the question of the age of the marriage of Aisha. In spite of the statement in Bukhari and Muslim, some say it is 6, some say 9, some say 11, some say 13, some say 16. It's an area on which scholars differ. But whatever age somebody concludes on, it is describing. The Prophet married Khadija, some say at 29, according to Ibn Mas'ud, some say 40. This is describing. It is not prescribing it as this is fard, this is what it should be, or this is what it must be. And so what we find in Islamic jurisprudence is what is called maslaha or saddu zariya. Maslaha means concern for public interest. Saddu zariya means laws that come in to make prohibited things that were earlier permissible. It is called blocking the means or preclusions in the interest of the public or the individual. And so what we have is things like traffic laws that prohibit you the freedom to travel in the interest of the public. You must respect the traffic laws. environmental laws. We have limited age for riding a motorcycle or driving a car or a plane, for retirement, for this job and that job, for this type of study or that type of study, of criminal responsibility, political office, etc. And so if a society feels that it is in the best interest of its own community, the health of the children to be born out of a particular marriage, from a utilitarian cost-benefit analysis and what is actually in the best interest of the child in the modern context, the community and its leadership has a right, with the full support of scholars, to fix a minimum age for marriage, just as Islam allows for fixing minimum age for anything in the interest of the public. And Allah knows best. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi, Sheikh. Just a follow-up question before we move on.
Yes.
Yes, just a small follow-up question before we move on. Considering that there are several issues that can arise from the practice in several communities where young women who would legally be considered children are married off at early ages, would you not say that it is probably time that the Muslim community in Nigeria institute a minimum age for marriage, especially considering that many Muslim nations across the world have already done so?
Absolutely. I mean, we were among the last countries to eradicate polio. We're backwards in nearly everything, and even in the area of legal reforms. This is something that Malaysia, many other Muslim countries and scholars have done. But I think on our side, a couple of things. The government recognizes that religious scholars have a voice in the community and they matter. However, we have not found the concerted effort to ensure that our best and brightest study religion, or that we build the capacity of our scholars. And so a lot of legal reforms that are established and suggested and proposed by Muslim scholars are actually countered by many Muslim scholars that are not nearly as qualified, but because there are a lot of people who listen to them. So I entirely agree with you. However, as they say, to travel far, you go with others. To travel fast, you go alone. I think a lot of our traditional scholars have unfortunately not understood how new fatwas, they agree in principle that la yunkar hukum bi tagir zaman, that there's an agreement among scholars that there is no denying that there will be change in rulings or change in fatwa with the change in context, change in time, change in culture. However, the mechanism of that change is an area that I think we have not learned how to use properly. In Islamic finance, the scholars there, actually all the graduates of Usulul Fiqh, Awaid, Maqasid, Sharia, seem to be congregating in Islamic finance. That's also where the money is for many of these scholars. So those who are actually good at ijtihad, juristic reasoning, seem to be moving in one field, and in the area of social justice, social laws, women's rights, interfaith relations, I think we are unfortunately backwards. We definitely need to take this dialogue much further.
All right. Thank you very much. Hajia Saudatu, do you want to come in?
Yes,
right.
Please. Sheikh Nur, may Allah bless you for being courageous to take the subject matter of marital rape. We are concerned as activists, and your explanations have really put it in perspective. One thing I want to bring to the table is this issue of the misrepresentation or perception of religious texts. For example, the ordinary, less educated person in a village would speak to you and say that the wife is his farm. He can approach her in any way and she has no right. If she denies him her attention or her body, she is cursed until the morning by all the angels of goodness. Now, we need to do more education that deconstructs the skewed understanding or knowledge that people have, or understanding that they have of what you have explained, that the mahar and that mutual responsibility to enjoy and to offer to each other the sakina you always speak to. Now, my question is, are there Sharia remedies for a woman who gets to be assaulted either as a result, of course, when we say forced marriage, we know that Dama, it is forced, so it's marriage, but there is assault. In a normal situation, can a wife seek redress for marital rape or take away the nomenclature, sexual assault by her husband? Thank you.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. Number one, I think, is simple answer. Yes, you've asked a number of questions, but let me start with the last one. Can she seek redress by a court? If she has a judge that is well educated and she presents it that she was abused, the judge, even as we said earlier, if she can prove that her husband even slapped her and she wants to get out of that relationship, she can. In Maliki jurisprudence, if she just wants to get out of the family for no reason other than she has had enough, she can, under what is called khulu. And we find this at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where a woman said, her husband has not been unfair to her, unjust, she just lost love. And the Prophet said, are you ready to give him back the garden he gave? So in Maliki law, with absolutely no reason, just as the husband can come in the relationship and go out, the wife can come in and go out. However, we should remember how undesirable divorce is. You should have a good reason. And if you find it is denigrating, trampling on your dignity, that is more than enough. So the judge can definitely give a divorce. And if there is injury, the judge can look at how to redress that. However, when you say law of the land, if something is a moral offense like riba, it doesn't automatically mean it is a legal offense until it is put as a legal wrong. So if you approach, and this is why sometimes some feel no need to have a separate law for marital rape if you can prove you were abused. We have enough under the various forms of abuse to handle that. On the side of religious scholars who would like to bring the Quranic verse and then the hadith on angels cursing, when it says, even if you take it from the literal point of view that your wives are hirthul lakum, they are like your farmlands. Who destroys his farmland?
Nobody.
You handle your farmland in such a way that it will sustain you and your family. The whole field of agriculture, which I studied, is actually to ensure that you manage land with respect. You manage land, you tender to the land as something that you will benefit from. And so it's good in and good comes out of it. The other thing is to try and use that metaphor to then say you discard the other metaphors used in the Quran, where it says, Hunna libasul lakum wa antum libasul lahunna, that they are like garments for you. Or the use of the word awliya, you are protecting friends of each other. We look at the sunnah of the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ, when he said, the best among you, hayrukum li ahlikum, the best of you are those who are best to their wives. We can't go and try and misinterpret a metaphor to go out of sync with everything we see. When we listen to the Quran very explicitly, it mentions the maqasid of marriage, the objectives of marriage. And it mentions mawadda wa rahma, love, and rahma, compassion. It mentions sakina, litaskunu ilayha, tranquility. All the other verses that are explicitly clear go against any interpretation of the relationship to be one of exploitation that gives men the, do what you want. The last point you raised on somebody saying that the Prophet ﷺ said, when a woman denies her husband sexual access, angels curse her until morning, or there's a sin upon her. Because when you say you agree to marry, it means you agree that the other person can have sexual pleasure. And so when the Prophet said, there is no contract, no relationship contract more sacred than that of the marriage contract. And because the marriage gives the man and the woman equal access, if she commits a sin by denying her husband, he also commits a sin by denying the wife. We don't have in Islam a same wrong deed like stealing, and you say the punishment is going to depend on the gender, or idol worship, or adultery, or any crime.
Noor, I think
Okay, seems-
I think you're muted. I think you're muted, Noor.
I think he's gone offline, in fact.
Okay.
I think he's gone offline. All right, then we're going to have to move on. Next, we have the Reverend Professor Cornelius. Are you online with us, Father?
Sure, I'm on. I am here.
Yes. You have a submission regarding the marriageable age of women from the Christian perspective.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, thank you very much. And sorry, because I'm on the road, the network has been off and on. I listened to a lot of the conversations, and especially that of Archbishop Joe Bache. He gave a lot of biblical passages concerning marriage and rape and the rest of them. But I want to say here that in the biblical texts, we really don't have the specific age for marriage, but we can rely on the Jewish custom. The Jews, for them traditionally, the minimum age a woman can marry is 12, whereas the age, are you hearing me?
Yes, sir, we're hearing it.
Okay, whereas the age of marriage for the man is between 18 and 24. But you will ask me, for example, like when Joash took over the throne of Israel at the age of 7, what happened? And of course, you know that at that age, there's going to be a regent, but later on, he had wives and so on and so forth. So the Old Testament, you know, ideally, what is stipulated that they talk about the age of puberty, which is a normal age that a woman should marry. But the New Testament had another view of it. If you read 1 Corinthians chapter 7, where Jesus Christ was talking about, Paul was talking about